Hello, my name is Hans and today we'll be changing the water pump on a Discovery 300 TDI. In order to change the water pump, first of all you need to take off the serpentine belt, which we've already done, and also remove the auxiliary bent tensioner. Once removed these two, you can see how you can get to the pump. At the moment we've also had the radiator and everything else removed, just so you can actually see what's going on. Okay, to remove the auxiliary belt tensioner we have a 15mm nut which we undo off the front. This one's actually coming out with a stud, so it doesn't matter which way it comes off. Withdraw the stud and note the peg that locates in a hole at the top. Make sure that's engaged when you fit it back again. Now we're nearly removing the water pump. The first step is to remove the two pulleys. This pulley needs to be removed because there's one bolt that's obscured by the outside. Remove all three bolts and remove the pulleys. Okay, now we've removed the two pulleys, we can see the 8 bolts on the water pump that we need to remove. Gently unscrew them all and hopefully we won't snap any off. As we remove the last of the bolts, it'll start to leak water out the bottom, so prepare to catch what leaks out the water pump in a bucket below. As we remove the last bolt, we should be able to remove the water pump. There's a part here where we can put something in to pry it apart just to lift it away. Okay, now we have some remnants of gasket that needs to be carefully removed without scratching or damaging the face. I'm using a nice old scraper I've had for years, and as you can see, it takes it off nicely. Okay, after scraping off all the bits of gasket, we can clean off any residue and remains with some Scotch-Brite. Just need to give it a light going over with, and then dry it all off and make sure we get rid of all the coolant. Before we refit the water pump, I've just put some silicone on the faces to attach the gasket, mainly to hold it in place rather than stop it from leaking. Okay, now we have the new pump ready to fit on. As long as there's no water leaking out and the faces are clean, we can attach the coolant pump, noting that the 3 long bolts go in the bottom holes. Easiest to slot those in first, and then the one with the bracket goes right at the top on this corner. Careful not to trap the gasket as we fit in the bolts. Now we can carefully tighten up all the bolts, not tightening them all up too much before we've done all the others. Okay, now we've refitted the water pump. We tighten up all the bolts nice and evenly up to the recommended torque setting, which is 25 Newton meters. Now we've refitted the water pump, we shall now replace the pulleys. Find it easy to put a bolt in and locate it with one of the screw holes. Once we've got one in, the others will go in without any trouble. It's not always easy lining them up, but it will go eventually. Now we've replaced the pulleys, we can tighten them up to the recommended torque setting. I'm going to lock it in position using a small pry bar, not using a screwdriver, but this is the best way I found, which doesn't slip or damage any of the bolts. We'll continue to tighten the bottom pulley the same as the top one. Okay, when we removed the auxiliary tensioner, the bolt or the stud came out with the nut already attached, so I'm going to replace the stud first and then put the nut on to secure it afterwards. So I'm going to insert the stud and using a special extractor going to wind it and tighten it back up. Now we can replace the tensioner. Noting that locating peg fits in a hole, slide it over the stud and line it up with a hole. Then replace the nut. Okay, now on refitting the belt, it's much easier if you have a second pair of hands to pull the tensioner up into position. So if somebody can hold it up there, that'll give me two pairs of hands, and I usually start at the bottom of the pulley on the crankshaft and work my way around towards the alternator, up onto the water pump and back to this big idler pulley. Make sure it's sitting in all the grooves. It should just fit over, and if we release the tension, that should tighten up nicely, making sure all the belts not missing any of the grooves.